My name is Alara and I am an architect. For years, I poured my soul into my work, believing that talent and hard work were enough. I learned that they aren't. Not in a world where men like Marcus exist. He was my mentor, the charismatic senior partner everyone admired. He took me under his wing, telling me I had a unique vision. I believed him. We were working on a groundbreaking project, a sustainable city prototype that would revolutionize our firm. Concept was mine, a design I had spent a year perfecting. It was my masterpiece. Then came the day of the big presentation. The room was packed with clients and executives. Marcus went on stage, and he didn't introduce me as his partner. He introduced the project as his own. He presented my design, my blueprints, and my vision, and he took all the credit. He spoke about his late nights and his moments of inspiration. I watched in a daze as my masterpiece was stolen from me, piece by piece, right in front of my eyes. No one even looked at me. I was a ghost in my own victory. Project was a wild success. Marcus was hailed as a genius. He was promoted to a new, higher-paying role. He received bonuses, praise, and public recognition. My name was never mentioned. I was left with a single, uncredited line on his resume. The anger festered. It was a cold, hard knot in the pit of my stomach that grew heavier every day. I couldn't scream, I couldn't confront him. I was a junior employee, and he was an untouchable star. I was alone, lost in a storm of injustice. But then, the simmering anger turned into something else. Became a quiet, focused resolve. The seeds of resentment had been planted, and now it was time to tend to the garden. I realized that my revenge wouldn't be loud or angry. It would be a masterpiece, just like my stolen design. It would be a structure built on a foundation of his lies, designed to collapse with a quiet, devastating grace. I would use the same principles of architecture to bring him down. The ultimate revenge would be so calculated, so precise, he would never see it coming. The moment I decided to act, the world sharpened into focus. My first step was research. I knew Marcus was a man who hid his flaws, but every person leaves a trail of breadcrumbs. I started with his online presence, not for what he wanted me to see, but for what he tried to hide. I delved into his old social media accounts, his financial statements, and his professional network. I was a digital archaeologist, digging for skeletons. I found that Marcus had a pattern of taking credit for others' work, but he was always careful, always covering his tracks. I discovered he was a prolific writer of ghost-written articles for online publications. They were all on architecture and design. He would pay young, struggling writers to write for him, but he would take all the credit. I also found something more damning. I found a string of shady financial transactions. He was taking kickbacks from contractors, a common but hard-to-prove practice in our industry. He had created a complex web of shell companies to hide the money, but I was an architect. I could see the structure. I started my initial chess moves. I created an anonymous email account on a public computer. I began sending small, seemingly random tips to a few industry journalists. Tips were vague, a few questions about his past projects and his financial dealings. They were just whispers. I also made sure my involvement was untraceable. I used a proxy server to hide my IP address. I was meticulous, like building a house with no fingerprints. I didn't want to leave any clues. I wanted to be a ghost, a shadow lurking in the digital world. My perfect alibi was that I was an obedient, hard-working employee who had long moved past the incident with Marcus. I would nod and smile whenever he spoke, pretending to admire him. I was the last person anyone would ever suspect. The whispers I had sent to the journalists began to take hold. A few articles were published, asking general questions about kickbacks and the use of ghostwriters in the architecture industry. They didn't mention Marcus by name, but they didn't have to. Questions were specific enough that they began to attract the attention of his peers. The domino effect had begun. He began to look nervous at meetings. He started to question his team, asking if they were speaking to anyone outside the company. I exploited his blind spots. Marcus was overconfident and arrogant. He thought he was untouchable. He believed he was the only one with the right to take credit for others' work. He never considered that someone would turn his own tactics against him. I began to leak small, unverified tidbits about his past to a few carefully chosen colleagues. I would frame them as concerns. Did you know that Marcus once had a project that was almost shut down due to a financial dispute? I would ask in a low voice. The rumors began to spread. People started to talk. His public perception was slowly shifting. He was no longer the brilliant, trustworthy architect. He was a man with a past, a man with secrets. The more he tried to defend himself, the more he looked guilty. He was like a man standing on a foundation of quicksand. Every move he made to defend himself only made him sink faster. I was the silent force, the hidden architect of his downfall. My revenge was a work of art. My plan almost unraveled when a curious journalist, a young woman named Clara, got a tip that was too specific. She suspected it was me. She emailed my work account asking for a meeting. I froze. I had been so careful. I didn't respond. But then, to my surprise, a new source, a rival of Marcus, sent her an email. This rival, a senior architect from another firm, confirmed some of my tips. He had a grudge against Marcus and wanted to see him fall. He became my unexpected ally. Clara, the journalist, was a smart woman. She saw the bigger picture. She didn't just want to expose Marcus. She wanted to expose the entire system that allowed men like him to thrive. She wanted to expose the corruption in our industry. I was a source, a silent partner in her investigation. The moral dilemma was the hardest part. I saw a man's life unraveling, a man who had a family, a career, and a reputation. I asked myself if I had gone too far. Was my revenge a form of justice, or was it just another act of cruelty? I couldn't tell the difference anymore. I was a ghost. I was a shadow. I was a person who had lost a part of herself in the pursuit of vengeance. The revenge wasn't just about Marcus anymore. It was about me. It was about reclaiming my dignity and my stolen legacy. I knew I had to go on. I knew I had to see it through. My silence, my quiet suffering, my stolen work, it all had to be avenged. I had come too far to turn back now. Plan was in motion, and there was no stopping it. The grand reveal was a surprise party. It was a gala hosted by our firm to celebrate Marcus's new promotion. The room was filled with the most influential people in our industry. Marcus was at the center of the stage, giving a speech. He was in his element, a charming, charismatic fraud. Just as he was about to make a toast, Clara, the journalist, stood up. She had a team with her, and they were all holding copies of a major online publication. The headline was a bombshell. The architect who built his career on a foundation of lies. The article exposed everything: the stolen designs, the financial kickbacks, the ghostwriters. It was a brutal, meticulous, and unassailable takedown. Marcus's face went pale. The room fell silent. The aftermath was brutal. Marcus was fired on the spot. His clients pulled out. His reputation was in tatters. The firm was facing an internal investigation. It was a long, slow, and public fall. He was a ghost in his own victory. The lasting lesson was not about vengeance. It was about justice. My revenge wasn't about hurting Marcus. It was about exposing him. I didn't feel a sense of triumph. I felt a sense of peace. The anger was gone. I had reclaimed my dignity. I had taught a man a lesson he would never forget. My revenge wasn't loud. It was quiet. It wasn't about anger. It was about art. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt whole again. The story of my revenge was over, but my story was just beginning. Thank you, and let me know in comments how you like the story. Which part was the most interesting and what kind of revenge stories you like? Subscribe for weekly interesting revenge stories.